intro here. It's been a while. You might notice that my makeup, and actually I'm still wearing it, is exactly the same for or looks mysteriously like Haku, and that's because I just finished filming my Haku makeup tutorial. But I'm recording this because a lot of people, proportionately, I mean, I have a lot of subscribers for a lot to mean a lot, but as we say in the teaching world, if one person asks a question, it means there are 10 more people that want to ask the question, and that is, how did I make my Howl jacket? So as I mentioned in my video, my Howl makeup tutorial, my Howl jacket is handmade. I patterned it all, and actually it's entirely made out of stuff that I already had, with the exception of the lining. So ideally it should be a cheap thing to make for you guys. Also, it should be, my tutorial slash talk here should be fairly competitive, competition friendly, as well as beginner friendly. So this whole video is hopefully going to be very, very friendly for any purposes you may have for this costume, whether you're a beginner or if you're a little more advanced. I'd like to think that I'm kind of intermediate, so I'm by no means a professional. I have taken exactly one costuming class in my life, and it was one semester long. So let's jump right in. So first of all, I just want to mention that in the description box below, or if you're on mobile on a tablet to the side, you will find a copy of my pattern thing here that I made, which is by no means drawn to scale, but I have on it the shapes that I used and what their measurements are, minus seam allowances. So when you draw these, the actual size, you will also have to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance, or 3/4 or 3/8 inch, whatever you prefer to use as a seam allowance. Some people even like to have a 1 inch seam allowance in case they really mess up or they really need to take something out. This is a very basic shape, so I don't think that you'll really need more than about a 1/2 inch. Also, I'm just going to point out that when I made this, it was to be entirely perfectly like a recreation of what you see in the movie. A lot of people like to add lace or rhinestones or a bunch of other things to make it more fancy, and you can feel free to do so. This is just for like the most basic, exactly what it looks like in the movie, and specifically using this picture as reference because this is what I had for reference when I did it. So, the first thing that I'm going to mention is the colors. Okay, so the pink. I think one of the things that makes my jacket so unique and what makes it look so nice is the color of the diamonds. A lot of people use light blue because when you see it, it looks like it should be light blue, but it's not. It's actually gray. The yellow was made out of yellow fabric, but please feel free to use bias tape. Double fold bias tape will do the trick wonderfully. Lining was $1 a yard, red lining at Walmart. No kidding. Nothing wrong with it. I say, why not go for the cheapest thing? Cosplay is not a cheap hobby. Sleeves or the shoulders do have shoulder pads in them. You can buy shoulder pads from Joann's, just like basic shoulder pads, just like they used in the 80s and 90s. I actually got mine. I just went to the thrift store, found a really old garment that had shoulder pads in it, and ripped the shoulder pads out. 50 cents instead of $5. Cosplay is an expensive hobby, why not make it cheaper, right? Going back to the diamonds, I think that sometimes quilting can look very like a quilt, so that it has very like kind of like you can see the seams, and ideally a well done garment wouldn't do that. But what I used was heat and bond, and honestly the diamonds probably took me 3 or 4 hours just on their own, but the beauty of heat and bond is that it finishes the edge, so you don't have to worry about sewing it an extra time, you don't have to worry about it looking like it's been glued on. I mean, it just like, it flows right with the fabric, and it's just like right on top of the pink. So also, if you're using bias tape, I recommend using 1 inch. So now on to more construction points. So when you see, in this picture in particular, I think there are other pictures when you see it.
Yes, in particular here you can see that the sleeves are longer than the base of the jacket, and frequently I see a lot of cosplayers where they haven't done that, and that's a really easy fix, even if you're using a basic jacket pattern, to just extend the sleeves. And the end of the jacket should extend right around if your arms are straight down, the first knuckle of your hands. So when you're just wearing it, it'll kind of feel like you're being entirely covered up and overtaken. But you can see also that the entire jacket is lined in red. But since Howl doesn't actually wear it as a jacket, when you're doing the sleeves, you have a little bit of leeway on the shape of them, which is why I didn't worry too much about what the shape of them should look like that I was going to give you. Because it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you try to wear it as a jacket and you aren't perfect at it, it might be a little uncomfortable. I know mine is a little bit, but that doesn't matter too much.
And remember, this is done to my measurements, so just real quickly, it's basically a square jacket, but my shoulders are approximately 20 inches across, and from my shoulder to my hip is about 23 inches. That should give you some perspective on about the size.
So for the collar, you'll need to cut out both the red and the pink. And then you'll also need to cut out some medium weight interfacing. That'll help it stand up straight. I definitely wish that I had used a stronger interfacing in mine than it has, because his is very, very stiff. I have it as one complete piece. If for some reason you feel yourself short on fabric, go ahead and cut it in half so that it's just like this half, and then line this up with the fold on the fabric. So now when we get to the front, again, it's all in pink, so cut out 2 of those, and cut out 2 in red. Here in the back, I have it done so that it is placed along the fold. And again, this one, I have it marked as cut 1 gray, because if you're lining it up on the fold, then that's going to give you like 2 halves, basically. They're already connected, you know. Important thing to remember here is that whatever you decide to make your shoulder measurement needs to be the same on the back and the front, of course. I mean, that sounds like common sense, but it's something just to like keep in mind, because otherwise you're going to have a big headache when you're trying to sew it all together in the end. And that's the same for this side seam here, should be the same for both of these. And then you also need to cut this out in your lining. Now to the sleeves, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. I would suggest getting a hold of a sleeve pattern, tracing it, and making that match these dimensions that kind of match yours more. So the shape of the sigh on the sleeves, or I guess it's not really the sigh if it's on the sleeves. Basically it's where the sleeve meets the jacket. The measurement of this should be bigger than the combined measurements of these two. And that is because if you see it on Howl, it kind of bulges out here. And one thing to keep in mind is that when you're putting it together, you don't want it to look like ruffles. So you'll want to be very careful when you're gathering it, but it definitely should have that volume. And obviously having the shoulder pads there are going to help that, but if you make it the exact same, then it's just gonna go flat down and like a very well tailored constructed suit, which would be wonderful for a Sebastian tailcoat, but not exactly what we want for Howl here. So these combined is probably yeah, I think it is 20 inches. So let's assume that if you did a round measurement of here, it'd be about 23 inches. And you have a couple of options as to how you want to do it. What I did was I made the pink one part, the yellow one part, the beige one part, the yellow one part, so that it's all separate pieces sewn together. But you can have it be a pink base and then the yellow, the white, the yellow on top of that, as long as you're very, very careful in your top stitching using matching thread and very, very meticulous top stitching. But basically it's just an inch of yellow, or 1 inches of yellow and 4.5 inches of cream. It's not actually white, as you can see. I have seen some people who used gold instead of all the yellow, And I think that does look nice, but like I said, I'm going to exactly kind of recreate what we see in the movie. And in the movie we see yellow, so I used yellow. Again, that's up to you how fancy you want to make it. Some people put lace and rhinestones and glitter all in these cream and gold areas. And for the diamonds, like I said, these are just attached with heat and bond before the jacket is constructed. So the diamonds are attached to the pink, and then the front was attached to the side. So yeah, it was one piece before it was constructed. And it is a lot of diamonds that are cut out to this measurement here, and again, I will have the link for this image attached. You've got your pieces now. So the first thing you want to do is attach your sides together. So like I said, this was all one piece before I did this, so you don't see any little extra bits of diamond chilling out here in the seam. It's all just one flat thing. Then do your shoulders, so that by then you should have something that looks kind of like a vest. Go ahead and construct your sleeves however you're doing them, and do the side seams of your sleeves first, so that they are a tube. Then you'll want to have your sleeves right side out and the vest part of your jacket inside out so that you can attach them. Then attach the yellow to the pink of your collar. Then attach just the collar to the shell here so that it's still, like, we don't have any lining in here. I'm assuming you've already iron-on interfaced anything that you're iron-on interfacing, so that so far you have just the shell, none of the red lining is attached yet. Then attach the red to just the collar, or you can attach the red to the collar before you attach the collar to the jacket, but do not sew the red part when you do that. You basically have to sew the inside of the pocket to the inside of the outside of the jacket to the outside of the jacket, inside kind of the pocket made by the flap. That can be a little challenging if you're not used to doing it, but the reward of doing it that way is that when you completely finish your jacket, there are no seams on the inside. It's always good if you are competing. So moving on to the lining, do everything you've already done. So the sides, sew the shoulders. You should basically have what looks like a red shadow of the jacket so that it's exactly the same 100%. Then you flip the lining inside out so that the seams are together. They always say right sides together. This is kind of the same thing. Because then when you sew this, when you flip it, it's all the seams are on the inside. So for the sleeves, that can be a little challenging. Do remember to leave this seam open until the very, 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 very end. That's going to be how you're going to flip it. You may want to go ahead and sew this part of the sleeve, the cuff of the sleeve, the lining to the cuff first, just so that when you're sewing everything else it gets a little easier. That's kind of up to you. It can be a little tricky. My suggestion is always pin first, pull it out to see how it looks, put it back, and then sew. Pin, look, sew, so that you don't have to take your seams out. So now once your lining is attached here, and don't forget to attach your yellow bias tape, which again you can do either just by top stitching it in or by stitching it on the folds to the pink and the red so that it kind of is the seam and everything is inside. It looks wonderful that way. And then for this collar, it does get a little tricky here to finish what this ends up being because it has to be hand sewn at this point, basically. Winding your needle in and out. You can kind of see some of the threads here. So winding the needle through the fold of what is your seam allowance here. And it helps a lot if you press it before you sew it, because then all the lines are there and you just have to sew them in place. Finally, you'll add your shoulder pads. And again, these shoulder pads you could put them on the inside of the jacket, but I kind of chose to have them on the outside so that everything was flowing over them. I didn't want any part of the jacket pulling against the shoulder pads, because that can add bulk in weird places. So I intentionally chose to have them visible should someone like pull the jacket off of me for some reason. So yeah, if you are competing with it, do keep in mind that the shoulder pads will be visible. You may want to take some extra lining or something and kind of cover them up, or at least have them be red as well so they match, but I didn't really worry too much about that because when I'm wearing it, you don't see them. And then I also have these hook and eyes here. I personally would like to have the chance to go back and replace these with skirt bars, which are basically hook and eyes but with big bars, and they're like bigger, you know? Just so that they're a little stronger, because these do get unattached from my blouse quite easily, my tunic, but these do just make it so that it attaches onto my tunic so that it's less likely to fall off, so that when I'm photo shooting I don't have to worry so much about if it's falling off. It does occasionally still come off, but mostly just if I'm like around con and my bag kind of rubs against it or something like that. But I hope this is helpful for you. Final total of fabric that you should need is probably about, and this is obviously if you're making it my size, and if you're, you know, kind of close to my measurements, if you're a little shorter, you might want to make the length a little shorter. If you're a little wider, you might want to make the shoulders a little wider. But if you're probably within about 3 inches of width and length to my measurements, you can probably use this pattern. Otherwise, go ahead and just modify the length or the width, however you need it to be modified. Final tally of fabric, about a yard of pink, a yard to a half a yard of gray lining. Again, I'm not certain how much I had. It might have been 3/4 of a yard. Probably if you're using bias tape, you'll want at least 2 packs. Otherwise, you'll just need maybe a half a yard of yellow, maybe 1/3 of a yard or 1/4 of a yard of the cream, because all you're using it on is these cuffs, and then maybe 2 yards of red, and then you'll need the hook and eyes and the shoulder pads.
Yeah, that's my Howl jacket, and I'm hoping that that helps you guys who wanted to know how to make my Howl jacket, even just a little bit, so that you guys can make your own. Again, a lot of people add a lot of embellishments. I've seen some people add like jacket padding into it. I think that it looks almost like, well, I think it looks very, very, very thin in the movie, so I don't have any padding on the inside except for what little interfacing that I needed to make the lining lay flatter and to make the collar stand up straight. And even still, I have trouble with that. When I go do photo shoots and stuff like that, I have to, you know, reorient it, or my photographer has to keep telling me, pull your collar up, it's falling down again, so. Yeah, you may want to add some wire in there so that there's more dimension, or again, if you want to embellish it, go ahead and add pearls and rhinestones and lace. I've seen a lot of really gorgeous renditions of this jacket done, some winning Best in Show awards at contests. I've seen Howl done at the WCS multiple times, so yeah, don't be afraid to take this and run with it. I mean, this is just totally go for it. I wanted mine to look like the movie, but if you want yours to be sparkly, dazzling, ooh-ah amazing, then please feel free to do so. Just remember that it'll look a little bit less like it's store-bought if it actually fits your measurements. So go ahead and measure yourself. On the pattern you can see what my measurements are, and you can kind of compare and see, do you need to make it wider, do you need to make it longer? May need to make bigger diamonds or more diamonds. Just remember to keep those things kind of in mind. I didn't do any math when I was making this. I was just kind of like, well, it's kind of this shape and it kind of goes like this, so yeah. And then it turned out, so I hope you guys use this to your full advantage, and I hope that you do fabulously with your Howl cosplays, and please feel free to link me any photo shoots that you want me to see. I love looking at cosplayers, I love networking with cosplayers, I love meeting cosplayers of all abilities, so yeah, I look forward to seeing you all later. Don't forget to like, subscribe, post a comment about how wonderful Howl is, because he's beautiful. Or how much you like the music in the video that I have no idea what music it's going to be yet. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you again hopefully soon. Sorry for taking so long to make some videos for you. Bye. Ciao.